I keep having this nagging feeling that I've forgotten something.
Hey, if you forgot it, it probably wasn't all that important.
Yeah, I guess.
So State of Play was yesterday, and I think opinions are pretty mixed right now. I thought the reception to this show was kind of unexpected. I say opinions were mixed. Really, by that, I mean the PlayStation diehards can't decide if they're actually going to defend this one or not. After the May State of Play, it seemed the PlayStation dudes were like, nah, man, that was an amazing show. That was a fantastic show. When in reality, that show was basically just Astrobot and a bunch of other stuff nobody cares about. And then this show rolls around, and it's basically just Ghost of Tsushima 2 and also a bunch of stuff nobody cares about, but the PlayStation base seems a lot less eager to defend it this time around, which I thought was interesting because I actually thought on net this was a better show than the May one. I think that really just goes to show how disillusioned a lot of the PlayStation diehards are becoming after Sony has gotten so complacent with them over the last couple years. 2024 hasn't exactly been, overflowing with great first-party PlayStation content, and PlayStation can't really seem to keep their feet out of controversy for 5 seconds. They keep raising the prices of absolutely everything, and it was only a few weeks ago that they revealed a $700 PS5 Pro with basically no real selling points to speak of other than 30 FPS being jumped to 60 FPS in some games, even though the base console was already sold to you with 60 FPS as a selling point. So why were they expecting us to get excited about this? But let's just go through my notes. I watched State of Play and I was taking notes on my little notepad as things went along, so let's just go in order of game and all my thoughts, and we can see if we can come to a conclusion about what really happened here. But there's not going to be anything intelligent here. There's really not going to be. There was no Bloodborne. There was no Demon Souls. There was no Spider-Man 3. There was no Wolverine. There wasn't even any Spider-Man 2 DLC, which I thought for sure was going to be announced. But you know what there was? There sure was Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered. Good thing part of Sony's budget went to that. So the show opened with some free DLC for Astrobot. In my notes, I wrote very groovy and cool. I think it's great that Sony is leaning into Astrobot so much. Genuinely, I think it's fantastic that they're leaning into this 3D platformer and this very old school minded game of theirs. And this very old school minded game that's doing very well and being received very well. I hope this is indicative of what Sony is going to focus on in the future. Although later in the show, they showed some other things that make me think, no, Sony is absolutely not going to be leaning into this in the future, but for the time being, Astrobot has some free DLC coming, and that is, again, very groovy and cool. Then there was something called Midnight Walk, which was a claymation game, which looks kind of cool. It reminded me of Alice Madness Returns. I'm really not sure what kind of game or what kind of experience this is supposed to be. I'm worried that this is yet another new horror, spooky game that's really just supposed to be more about the atmosphere than the experience itself, but it is a cool idea. I will absolutely give them that. And then the next thing they showed off was Hell Is Us, a horror Souls-like thing, potentially groovy and cool. I really couldn't tell what kind of gameplay this was going to have. It looked Souls-likey, but then again, everything seems to look Souls-likey nowadays in gameplay reveal trailers. But I mean, it looked interesting, it looked neat. And then right after that, there was Metro Awakening, which seems to be a more psychological return to the horror roots of Metro, which was nice to see as someone who enjoyed the first 2 Metro games and then was a little confused where they were going with Metro Exodus. And at this point in my notes, I just wrote Jerry Seinfeld, quote, "What's the deal with PlayStation horror games out of nowhere?" Because you gotta admit, that was a little weird. That was a little weird how they opened the show with just Astrobot, free DLC, and then horror game, horror game, horror game. And then later in the show, they go back to horror game, horror game, horror game. I just think that's very odd. I very much enjoy horror games. I flippin' love horror games. Silent Hill 2 is my favorite game of all time. Gee whiz, Bloober Team, you sure do have me in your corner on this one. Your game looks like butts. But I just think it's funny that out of nowhere, PlayStation is leaning into horror games. I wasn't aware there was such a big horror audience on their platform, especially since this is the same company that demanded Martha is Dead be censored because it was too spoopy. And that was only 2 years ago. So I don't know. Maybe it's just because it's spooky season, but moving on. The next thing was Archaeage Chronicles. Archaeage Chronicles looked like some kind of dark fantasy For Honor type thing. I don't know. I don't know. That looked fine. Didn't really raise my hairs or anything. But one thing that did raise my hairs was Pal World launching on the PlayStation. That's awesome. More games coming to more platforms is always groovy and cool. Although I can't wait to hear about how Palworld is now suddenly good from all the PlayStation fanboys who were shitting on it for a year and a half straight because it wasn't on PlayStation. Next on the list was Lunar Remastered Collection. In my notes, I just wrote JRPGs. Next was Shredder's Revenge DLC, which I just wrote, we're so fucking back, oh fuck yes. Shredder's Revenge is such a goddamn good game. I played that game at launch. I haven't played it since launch, and now I want to go back and play it again. That game is fantastic. And then right after that, out of fucking nowhere, we got a Keanu Reeves Shadow voice pack for the new Sonic game. What is happening? Then next up, there was Fantasian Neo Dimension. I just wrote JRPGs. And then Dragon Age Veilguard. I also wrote, I'm sure this gameplay appeals to someone. I forgot I wrote that. Although I did think it's funny that during the big gameplay fight, when the boss fight, they kept fading to black and then skipping ahead to later points of the fight, which, is that not indicative of a boring game? We're cutting a trailer of our game. How do we make it as exciting as possible? I know. What if we chop up bits of the gameplay and just show the exciting bits and cut out the parts that are boring? Ooh, you were right there. You were right next to a revelation. Then we got some Alan Wake 2 DLC. I just wrote Epic Games Publishing Hitman VR. I wrote, this probably appeals to a very interesting group of people. I forgot I wrote that too. Legacy of Kain Remaster. That's pretty cool. Fear the Spotlight. What's the deal with PlayStation liking horror out of nowhere? Towers of something something. Looks okay. Lego Fortnite, Epic Games. Fortnite controller, Epic Games. Dynasty Warriors Origins. Yep, that looks like Dynasty Warriors. Monster Hunter Wilds. Yep, that looks like Monster Hunter. Also, holy cats, that's a lot of pre-order nonsense. The montage of pre-order bonuses and then the guy talking about the pre-order bonuses was almost as long as the trailer itself. Capcom, snap out of it. We're losing you. You had such a good run for a few years. No, come back to us, please. Next up was Lego Horizon, which I think is honestly a much better fit for the Horizon IP than whatever else they've been doing with it. Seriously, Lego Horizon looks pretty appealing in a way that the Horizon mainline games just do not look appealing. Case in point, Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered. What are you getting with Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered? Oh, you're getting re-recorded voice lines and a whole bunch of new motion captures for new cutscenes, new character models, new animations. So they're not even trying to sell you on gameplay anymore. Isn't that fun? They want you to pay $10 for a bunch of stuff that is going to be modded into the original version within a week of launch. They want you to pay $10 for new character models and voice lines and cutscenes, all of which can basically just be found and replaced into the original version on PC for no cost. Also, what happens if you pay $10 for the remaster, but then you want to use the original character models or the original voice lines? Like what if this is a Silent Hill HD collection situation where the re-recorded voice lines are not actually the ones that you want to play the game with? Can you switch back, or are you just fucked? Because the way they promoted this makes it sound like you're just fucked. So I would love some clarification as to whether or not there is a way to revert back to vanilla after you pay $10 for the upgrade, but methinks there's not. But thanks for putting resources into that, Sony, instead of Bloodborne. Really appreciate that. Next up was Stellar Blade DLC and a Nier Automata crossover. That's cool. That makes sense. That crossover makes sense. Then there was a bunch of PS Plus stuff. Okay. And then they closed the show with Ghost of Tsushima 2, which at this point I was just so tuned out of the presentation that even though this was meant to be the big zinger, the big showstopper, in my notes I just wrote Ghost 2. That's neat. And I think that really just sums up the show. There was a bunch of stuff that was neat. There was a bunch of stuff that was okay, and then there was a bunch of stuff that was incredibly pointless and probably was just there to take up space. Although I did think it was funny that they brought out Mark Cerny to talk about the PS5 Pro announcement again, or to quote this person on Twitter, they remastered the PS5 Pro announcement already, which seems in character for Sony. I just don't know what to think of this show, because I thought the last show was completely pointless, and then I thought this show was genuinely generally a step up. I would give this show, like, I don't know, a 3 out of 5, I guess, maybe 2.5 out of 5. Like, it wasn't offensive. I thought it was definitely better than the last one, but the general consensus from the PlayStation base, at least the people I'm seeing on Twitter, is that this was like the worst show ever. So I'm just confused. Maybe you guys are finally getting burnt out. Maybe you guys are finally waking up to the fact that Sony's a dog shit company who doesn't care about you, and you need to hold them accountable for not caring about what they give to you. And if that's what's happening, then, you know, God bless. I'm happy you guys are waking up, but I'm just confused. You know, there were things in here that looked cool, most of them multi-platform. I guess all of them multi-platform, because Ghost 2 is absolutely going to come to PC, and I keep calling it Ghost 2 because I legitimately do not remember the actual name of the game. But like, I don't know. That sure was a state of play. I won't deny that. That sure was a state of play. Great job, I think. Maybe. I don't know. Dude, I gotta take a shit. I had a bunch of I don't know why I made this video. Why did you watch this? Why did any of you watch my channel? This is dog shit content. Anyways, cool. Toodles.